Welcome to The Art of Growth. This is Jim Zartman, and today Joel Hubbard and I are interviewing our sixth panel in our series on patterns, where we are looking at the very essence of the Enneagram by looking at the core motivation and the patterns of the type. Before we jump in with our panel, you can go to theartofgrowth.org to take a free Enneagram test or instincts test to find out your type. You can sign up for our newsletter there, which has all kinds of good stuff in it and keeps you up to date with what we've got going on. Resources, classes, certification, business training tools, whatever you could need. And if we're missing something, we'll make it, because that's how we roll. So check all of that out at theartofgrowth.org, or even go there and sign up for a coaching session with one of us on the individual coaching page. And the summer tends to be a little slow, so right now we got a special going and you can get discounted sessions. So go sign up for some. Okay, let us jump in with our Type 6 panel on patterns as we return to the very center of the Enneagram by asking other people what it's like to be them. And remember, to each of you, every day you are becoming the expert on you. We are just here to help. Let's jump in.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Type 6 Patterns podcast. I am so excited to be here with some sixes, and we're going to dive in and explore what we're talking about. What are patterns? So let's start by having each of you introduce yourself and tell us where you are from.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm from Stockholm, Sweden.
I'm Rachel. I'm from Seattle.
I'm Shining. I'm currently in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
I'm Julie. I'm from Maryland.
Okay, well, welcome to each of you. We have been asked to explain what we mean by patterns. In other podcasts, we've often talked about the core motivation, the core need, followed by the pattern of the type or the strategy of the type. And we were reached out to by a friend of ours who's been following us for a while and said, hey, could you explain that and say a little bit more about what that means by type? And so we thought, well, let's ask you and find out what you mean by that. So the core motivation oftentimes is this sort of one-liner that is given for each type. And for sixes, it goes something like, the core motivation for the six is to feel safe, secure, and supported. And then following that, there's this description of sort of how the type goes about doing that. But what I'd like you to do is for you to describe your motivation using your words, your descriptions, and then we'll get into the pattern and explore that a little bit. So who would like to begin by describing the core motivation in your words?
So safety and security doesn't really, like when you first think of it, it's like locking the door and stuff like that. Don't really think about that, but it's definitely about emotional safety, emotional security, having safe relationships, knowing that they are okay. I'm okay with my people that I care about. Yeah, that.
So for me, safety and security, two of the S's for a six are important, but my number one S is support. Like most sixes, I seek support from outside myself. It's not something that I usually can rely on myself for. However, as I've gotten older and more confident, I have been able to rely on myself, but I still have moments where something has happened to make me feel insecure in my situation. And I basically just grasp out to family members. I mean, I called two of them last night because I didn't know what to do. So that's probably the most important thing. But also safety is very important. I'm always telling people they're not doing things that are safe.
I will see your three S's and I'll raise you two R's. So I think for me, I would say the words that come to mind are, I want to feel ready and resilient. And I really just never want to get caught flat-footed.
Yeah.
I always want to be a step ahead. I mean, this is something that people say a lot for sixes. I do feel the world is a dangerous and unpredictable place. And I think it's just the sense that no matter how well I know a person or an organization or a place, that it can always change. So I just want to watch out and stay vigilant. And there's no guarantee, So I think I want to be ready for that.
Love it.
Yeah. For me, it took a long time for me to identify that I was a 6 because of the words safety, security, and support and how often they were used. The one I resonate the most with is safety. But I think for me, it almost looks more like integrity or like having wholeness is important to me. And so creating room for myself in safe spaces, whether that's like being alone, I feel the safest because I can be fully myself, or certain relationships. There's this part of me that is kind of like challenging to create a safe space for me. And so it's not just like safety as in I want to go wherever it's safe, but I want to create a safe environment. And so there's this like challenging part of me that's like, I'm going to create a safe environment for myself. And I see that for me as like a piece of integrity, being connected to this, wanting to be whole no matter where I am, and fighting for that for myself and for other people. So it's all kind of tied together.
Well, this is why we have to ask you what that's like and how would you describe the core motivation? Because I think for each 6, it's going to come across differently. And the best that we can do is give a few words, and then from there kind of say, what is that really like for you? So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's talk about the sort of pattern that emerges. The way we describe the pattern is a kind of strategy, although I've been uncomfortable using that term simply because it feels too thoughtful. And I don't think our ego does a whole lot of thinking. It's a very reactive structure internally that is there to protect us from further threats and further problems. So I would say that it is a kind of strategy in the sense that what we're doing unconsciously is trying to protect ourselves or trying to get that need met. And so the question is, how does that look for you? How would you describe the pattern of the 6? What do you do to feel safe, secure, supported, ready, resilient, whole? I think I got a lot of it there. What does that feel like? What do you do?
So I like that you said that it's not that you don't like the word strategy, because my pattern is not a healthy pattern. There's another 6 I know who refers to it as, I think she calls it like the downward spiral, like the 6 spiral or 6ing out. My head goes in circles. So if I find something that I just am stressed out about, my brain can't get off it. And I just think, how can I fix it? Oh, let me go get somebody to help me. Oh, they're not working fast enough. Oh, how can I fix it? Oh, what can I do? And it's just like a constant circle, and it's not healthy. You become obsessed on a certain thing, and until it's resolved, at least for me, I can't move on.
And you're trying to resolve it through your head center. It's just
Yes. Overthinking is another thing I've been accused of. It's definitely a head center thing. Overthinking, not feeling, not trusting my gut, just thinking and being in my head.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot, Julie. I was thinking, like in getting ready for this podcast, was thinking through like growing up. And when I was younger, the way that I would feel safe would be to go away and be alone and really just sit there and think. And I remember being outside and my brother came up to me and he was like, do you want to play? And I was like, no, I'm thinking. And he was like, okay, but do you want to play soon? And I was like, no, I have to think for a long time before I can play. And I think I sat there for probably a couple hours thinking, just thinking through everything and trying to prepare. Like if someone says this is what I'll say. If someone does this is what I'll do. Coming up with every possible outcome, every possible solution. So I definitely relate to that, getting stuck in the overthinking.
Yeah, we talk about the 6 and their anticipation mechanism, and that's really what you were thinking about as you just described it. Sounds very much like the anticipation mechanism at work.
Yeah, I definitely relate to thinking in circles as well. I can do that. But since I said that what's important to me is emotional security and support, I also wanted to kind of speak to that a little bit and what patterns that led to when I was younger. So I think in my first relationships, like with my family and my best friend, I was very like nice and like drawn back a little bit, like watching and then kind of moving in, but kind of shy or nice because I'm the youngest, and that kind of fit the family quite well. I always mediated when there was a conflict because that meant danger. So I needed my relationships to be safe. So that's like, I can relate a lot to the 9, but for me, it was out of fear of my relationships. I needed them to be secure. But like a little bit later in life, I noticed that just being like kind of drawn back and careful, it didn't give me a lot of attention, and I kind of needed that as well. And maybe that's like the sexual side of it, but I wanted like people to notice me as well. And in a school setting, it didn't really happen. So I kind of I changed school, and I decided like, okay, I'm not going to be like shy or drawn back or anything. I'm just going to throw myself out there. And that was like a different strategy then to use. And I was really like just going for this like funny and bubbly, and like I just kind of skipped over that feeling of fear or waiting, and it just jumped into this like action and funny and like, okay, how are you? And so these are like 2 very different patterns. And like my parents, they were really surprised when they saw me with my friends, and I was like really outgoing, like, and excited. And but it's really just 2 different methods of coping with this insecurity that I have inside that I don't really want to show, because like so a lot of like joking about myself, like that's a big thing, because if I joke about myself or something that I did, then no one else can joke about me or attack me. So it's all about protecting myself, really, but it looks very differently.
It's that anticipation. So you anticipate like, what are people going to say or think? And then you beat them to the punch by saying, by self-deprecating kind of humor. What I love you also bring up is another feature of the 6 is your ability to contextualize. So it's like, okay, so that didn't work over here, so I'm going to try something different over here. And that's what a lot of 6s say, is that it depends. Who I am depends a lot on where I'm at and what's in my context, what's in my world, because of that ability, again, to think through strategy. How am I going to show up here in the space? So I appreciate you illustrating that. That's really good.
Yeah, I was going to say, just in the transition from like the inward to the outward that Rebecca mentioned, I feel like there's a bit of a both like phobic and counterphobic transition, like what you do with the fear and how you how you react to it, I guess. I was hearing other people talk, and it's funny. I do think I think a lot, but in my mind, it feels less like I'm in circles and sort of, stuck. I had this image of, when you play, I don't even play video games. When you play a video game, there's like a mini map in the corner. I feel like I'm always constructing the mini map around me, and I'm like patrolling the horizon and figuring out what threats are looming and, like what's coming at me. And so then I'm like armored up, I have this like fortress around me. I am thinking, but it's because I saw a threat and I'm like deploying my, my thinking onto the problem and like dealing with it. And then I like retract, and then I do another. So it feels a little bit more targeted to me. I had this feeling that I'm like really commanding the space. I think maybe, Rachel, you said you create safe spaces. I do feel like that's what I do. I'm like trying to make sure that all the things within my domain are settled. Yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling like I sound kind of, I don't feel so powerful when I'm doing it. It's not like I don't have like a delusion of omnipotence, but I do think that's how I feel I'm engaging with the world through thinking. It is kind of fun. It's not just like I'm cowering, So I think, although I don't think I'm a queen or, I do like, there's no like power delusion, but I think I have a whole arsenal of tactics and like mental contraptions, and I feel like that toolkit has been sharpened over time. So I have like, like razor sharp logical reasoning, and I have frameworks and ways to reframe things. And I, have all these plans I've concocted. And then even, I think Rebecca talked about this. It's hard for me to say this, but I do think there's some charm that I've developed in order to feel like I can get along in social situations. And it's like charm that I put on, which I feel that's the part that I think I'm not as identified with, or I'd rather not be the case. But I recognize that gets like added to my stance, like when I'm in, especially social situations I'm not super comfortable with.
Yeah.
what you said resonates so much with me. So I just remembered what my friend calls it, the six spin, but that only happens when I'm stressed out. Otherwise, a lot of my life is about planning and prepping. I am personally, my primary instinct is self-preservation. So for me, physical comfort and making sure my surroundings work for me is very important. So if I'm invited to a party, for example, or somebody's house, I want to know what that's going to look like before I get there. I want to know who's going to be there, what they're going to have to eat or drink, whether it's going to be socially appropriate for me to leave early if I'm just not feeling socially comfortable there. I mainly use my 5 wings, so I'm very introverted. And for me to come out of my shell and talk to people is a big ask. So I just need to make sure I have all my ducks in a row before I go there. And then what you said about, what Shining said about, putting on a mask, I call it putting on a facade. When I meet new people, I don't let the real me come out. I wait and see what they are as a person, how they are, and then react accordingly. And if they're not my type of people, you're not going to get the real me. You're going to get somebody I think they want to interact with. So there's a lot of people pleasing in me too.
Yeah, that brings something up for me, Julie, around, I go about that in kind of a different way. Is this person someone I can be the real me with? Mm-hmm. And I think I lead with myself in order to right away know so that I don't have to waste my time. Like I'm going to test them right off the bat. If they fail, then bye. Like I'm done here. And which goes along with kind of what I was talking about earlier of like wanting to create safe spaces in my relationships means like I'm not afraid of having conflict, because if the conflict needs to happen for me to feel safer, then I'll have the conflict so that I can now feel like, okay, that's resolved. I feel safe in this relationship. This feels good and reliable. So that's the part of me that kind of looks a little bit more like challenging or not like a 6 in the way that 6s are described, a bit more counterphobic.
Yeah, I mean, it's so uncomfortable to feel the potential that someone's going to portray. So I agree. Sometimes I pick the fight because I'm like, well, better get it over with, or like better know what, what the truth is, quote unquote. Like I have this idea that I'll just get closer to the truth if I catalyze it,
Yeah, that's why I used the word integrity earlier, meaning like honesty and truth, I feel is really important to a lot of 6s I know. And to me, like that's more important than almost anything else is like, I just want to know the truth.
Yeah, it's definitely important for me. Like I said, I'll put on a facade if I don't feel like I can interact with my real self. But then that's also the kind of person that I will probably avoid hanging out with because I don't like the way I feel. And the facade is a way to protect yourself.
Yeah. There's so much richness to everything that's being said here. It's like I'm being tantalized and want to pull in all the different directions. But there's something I think that might be helpful to a lot of our listeners, because a lot of panelists from different types say, truth is important to me, right? And somehow when all these types are together, they're not quite getting to that point of truth. There's a sense at which like, I'm not sure, that I feel safe because I'm not sure you're telling me the truth. So I have some suspicions and some theories, and so does Jim, around like, how does that look by type? And so, but I'm curious from your standpoint, because you're the expert on the 6, it's like, tell me what you're looking for when you say, I'm looking for truth in the relationships. Because nearly every 6 I know says that's the case. They want to know, and they don't want to be surprised later on finding something out about, something that they should have known ahead of time. So yeah, I'd love to hear what that looks like for you.
I think I'm looking for people to be consistent and dependable. I want people to say exactly what they mean and exactly do what they say they're going to do. And if people are like sugarcoating something or avoiding a difficulty or otherwise like doing anything besides just being as accurate as possible, I'm like, that means you're not trustworthy. So that's what I mean. I just want to be able to like know, I guess, to predict what people are going to do.
Is it in any specific areas of life, or is that across the board, or is there certain ways that you pay more attention to that?
I think it's across the board. I will say the people that I am most dependent on, like my partner or, my family, I care more because I find my fate is tied up with theirs. For anyone off the street, I might just be like, yeah, that person's like, they're just doing their thing. I see that they're trying to, posture, or they're a 3 and they want, admiration. That's fine. Like I can get it. And if it's far away from me, then I'm like, I get it. And it's fine. It's not threatening. But if it's like my partner and he's telling me he's going to do something and he doesn't do it over and over again, like it's a real like tender spot for me,
Yeah, for me, it's really important to have integrity with people I have relationships with. The 6 is often called the loyal skeptic, and that rings very true for me because I don't let the real me get seen until I know somebody and I feel like I can trust them. But once I trust them, I'm all in. I'm completely loyal and I'm trusting everything. And so if somebody turns out to be someone that they're not, or say they'll do something and they don't, I feel very betrayed because they've broken my trust. I've stopped talking to friends because of that. There are people who, once they break your trust, it's a way of protecting yourself again. You feel like you can't trust them again, or they might do something bad to you, or, disappointing, or not. It's more than disappointing though. It's like you put so much into them mentally and emotionally, and they betrayed that. And that to me is one of the worst things you can do to somebody.
Yeah, I feel like it all goes back to building safety, the need for honesty, to build trust, and this part of me that feels like no need for kind of like the fluffy, feel good, let me be really gentle and kind and soothing in the way that I talk to you, because I'm like, let's get to the point. Like, I want to know what you actually think. Don't sugarcoat it, because then I don't feel fully safe with you. It actually is harder for me if people are like trying to do that. So there's just like this directness that I appreciate and that builds safety and trust. And for me, it is most important with the people I'm closest with. With other people, it doesn't matter as much because they are not as impactful to me.
Mm. Well, both of these answers sound like this is how to be loyal.
I identify as being loyal as well. Like I do feel like I'm loyal, but I also, like Julie, have been like, you betrayed my trust. Goodbye. And I know that's not a very loyal thing to do. So it is like a little bit of I find that to be interesting, that although I think I'm the loyalist of friends, I hit my threshold so quickly. So,
well, the way you just described it, though, it sounded like you're very loyal unless someone betrays loyalty, because like you betrayed me.
Yeah. That's true. But I think what I'm working on within myself is, grace or understanding or patience, like things like that I think are virtues that don't come as naturally to me.
I'm trying to exercise more patience and forgiveness towards people. I'm not as bad as my grandmothers were both people who would cut other people off if they betrayed them. I don't cut people off. I guess when I said I lost friends, it was more like I just stopped reaching out to those people and decided they're not part of my life anymore. And therefore it just sort of fizzled. But it's really hard for me to have patience and forgiveness with people. And I don't know if that's a 6 trait.
It seems to me that as many of you, maybe all of you know, said it numerous times on podcasts, but I'm married to a 6. And so the fear of being abandoned or rejected is really, really primitive. It's deep within the system as early as they can remember. And so if something happens, it sets that off, and there's like that's the big one. To do what you just did feels like a rejection or an abandonment, and there's a looking for that oftentimes with 6s, like a looking for, are you telling me the truth? And so I'll give an answer, and my wife will say, well, but why did you do that and this? And she's trying to piece the puzzle together, and my response tends to be. So I need some help here. But my response tends to be like, are you calling me a liar? I just told you the truth. But it's like, yeah, but you said this before and you did that. Yeah, because I forgot. It is as simple as that. But for the 6, it's like, how could you? And there's a looking for that. Now, for all types, there's a looking for something. We're all doing something to protect ourselves. But so I'm just curious as to, is that part of it? Is this like, I'm afraid of this abandonment, this rejection. So I'm wanting to test to make sure that you're telling me the truth as part of why. I mean, it's not the whole thing, but just as
I have to respond because I have the opposite marriage of Joel. I'm not married to a 7, but I'm married to an 8. He doesn't like when I test him because everything he says, speaking of, wanting the truth from people, he says what's on his mind. If he said it, he meant it. But sometimes he doesn't do things as quickly as I want him to. And he thinks I'm nagging him, but really I'm just spiraling and obsessing. But a lot of times I'll test him and I'll be like, are you sure you're making the right decision? Have you considered X and Y? Because I always want to make sure everybody's looking at every side. But from his perspective, he's already done all that. And he's made a very quick gut decision. But I didn't see that process happen. That does not go to your rejection thing. Yes, rejection is a huge part of my six behavior now, but fear of rejection. But I just wanted to speak to the fact that I need to see the internal workings of your mind and the process you went through. It's not enough for you to just tell me.
That's huge insight.
Yes, but would his process convince you, because his process looks nothing like yours?
If he explained to me his process and it sounded reasonable and logical, then yeah. But if I don't get
By
to see
what
the process
standard?
at all,
And what is the
my standard?
got it? Okay, just so we're being clear on that.
Obvious. I mean, so of course it's by the sixth standard. Yeah, no, this is really brilliant though, the inner workings, because I think that is oftentimes what settles my wife is like, okay, now I understand the process of your thinking. Like you did actually put thought behind this. And we've said that there's a certain sort of trust metrics for each of the centers, and for head types, it tends to be around like, did you really think that one through? And
How did you get there?
And if you didn't think it through, that does not feel very good to me. I'm not sure I can follow. So there's a little bit more of the questioning around
Everyone who's dating or married to a six should understand that. It would make it so they would, every time your six asks you, did you consider X? At least you know where they're coming from. I wish my 8 understood that about me. So it's good that you understand that about your wife.
Okay, so let's go to that early childhood stories. What are some early maybe stories that help you to see, oh yeah, that's whether it was the formation of it or just one of the stories that illustrate that sort of pattern, the early childhood pattern of the six. So yeah, love to hear from each of you.
I was just in general, as long as I can remember, I felt rejected. I think it's true of sixes that we generally feel like we don't fit in, and maybe it's the lack of, confidence. So a lot of my perceived rejection could have just been in my head, but I was very, very shy as a kid. And really what shyness is a fear of speaking for fear of being rejected. At least that's what it was for me. And one of the things that resulted from that is my planning, the fact that I need to always have all my ducks in a row before I go into a situation so that I'm not rejected, I'm not left out, I'm not missing something. To this day, if I feel like a good friend has kept me out of the loop, or even if it's somebody I don't know well, if I meet someone and I just feel like I can't get in with them, and I don't know how to explain getting in other than like, I want them to know that I'm somebody they can count on. I want to be part of their social circle. If I feel like I can't get in with that person, it's someone I want to get in with, I automatically feel rejected. And I'm trying to get through that. But that's an age old story that's, I've been telling myself as long as I can remember.
I know on a previous podcast episode, there was some discussion about nature and nurture and, was it an experience or are you kind of born? I will say for me, like certainly as a small child, I was very knowledge seeking, but I was born in China and I came to the US at the age of 4. And I think that really locked my sixness in because, talk about the ground shifting beneath your feet and like everything changing and having to reorient literally to a whole new world. And I think during that time, my parents were also in survival mode. So they weren't really, present or attuned in the ways that maybe I would have needed from them. So I just remember, getting to the US, not knowing English. And I just watched everything so carefully. And I was picking up things like, what do people wear? Like, what do they eat? How do they behave? Like what keeps people socially glued together? Like who has power? And I was just needing to learn all that on the fly. And I think that really, I actually think when I say the world is unpredictable, I don't know that that's not true for like the small child me, that was really the case. And I'll illustrate this with one family story that I think is really funny, but really telling. So when I was 5 or 6, I went to a museum with a family friend and her daughter. And, kids at museums are like running around, and we went to the gift shop. And my friend was like, I want this keychain. I want this t-shirt. She was just like picking stuff up and asking her mom to buy it. And her mom says, I went up to her and I was like, I am buying this one keychain. It is $2.99. With tax, it's $3.14, and I have this much money, and I will get this much change back. And she was like, "What is wrong with this kid? Like, why does this kid know about taxes and cash and change?" But I had learned the entire system. I knew exactly what to expect. I was crystal clear on how to like make it in this museum shop. So I just think that kind of attention to the system and how it works was just really, it was a way for me to make that early immigration experience work out.
I relate a lot to what Shining you're saying. Growing up, I had a lot of anxiety. I grew up in a very conservative religious environment, and there was just a lot of right and wrong, good and bad. And so a lot of judgment, which for me created a lot of anxiety. And sort of my way of coping with that was just to try and disappear and not participate in things. Like I remember if I was somewhere and there were kids playing, I would just sit and watch and try and watch like, okay, how are they playing? What are they doing? What are the rules? And then maybe I would jump in after quite a while, or most likely I would just not jump in and would just watch. And that was my way of creating safety. I did that everywhere. Like anywhere I went, I always knew like, here's where the bathroom is. Here's where the drinking fountain is. Here's where everything is, because I was so hyper vigilant about everything and afraid of being caught, like not knowing something and then being judged or laughed at.
Mm.
Rachel, I think you just described my childhood. I remember very clearly in middle school, I basically spent every recess sitting by myself, watching everybody else, trying to understand the social rule. Like I never felt like I fit in socially. So I'd watch other people for how to act socially, how to fit in with that group. I targeted the group I wanted to fit in with, and I just watched until I felt confident that I could enter the situation. It's amazing to hear somebody else say that.
Yeah, I definitely did that too. Like, and I really relate to not the thing of not really speaking out at first, fear of being rejected or fear of being attacked, and just kind of waiting to see what everyone else is saying, to see when it's like safe to jump in. Or if I see that they're going in the wrong direction, I would say, no, hey, this is how it is. Or, when I kind of observed everyone to see, okay, this is how you do to like get popular or whatever. And then just kind of jumping into it, just jumping over that step of thinking.
Yeah. Sixes need a set of, at least for me, I need a set of rules to know how to play the game. And yeah. So looking at what you just said about looking, how did people get popular? I went through that thought process constantly. Why are these people in this social group? And why are these people in this social group? And what rules do I need to follow to get in this social group? And like most people listening to this are probably like, especially a 7 who's super social. I know I have a 7 friend who's super social. They're probably like, what the heck is wrong with you? You just go. Like, but we have to think about these things.
Yeah, I mean, that, 7s won't think of the rules necessarily, but there's other questions that we're processing. So we're all doing something. I love this so far. It's been really insightful to understand what's going on in the mind of the 6 and early on how that shows up. And what I want to say is that there's even more variety than what's present here. So for all those who are 6s out there or know a 6, there are some because of their high extroversion and because of their perhaps great sense of humor, figure out that they can use the humor as a means to getting around. So I've known some 6s like that. Very funny 6s, very quick-witted. And so because of that, they figure, well, I can get in at least. And while I'm spinning humor, I'm watching and I'm learning, right? So again, this is what we're trying to get underneath is don't get locked up, for folks who are listening, don't get locked up in those sort of particulars like, well, I don't do that, or that person doesn't do that. Of course not. We are all doing different things driven by this larger sort of strategy pattern of the 6 to feel safe in these different environments. So really appreciate it. All right. So let's round off by finishing with, when did you realize that your pattern, your strategy, wasn't working as well as it did? And let me set it up by saying that the pattern does work to some degree. I love how, I forget which one of you said, it might have been you, Shining, like, it's not that it's just all bad. It's like this part of it is, this is a little bit, so I'm paraphrasing. And I've been saying this too about 6s, like that's a differentiation between those who have anxiety and a 6, is that a 6 actually finds joy in solving complex problems. It's like there's a sort of euphoria even around solving it. As I love it when my wife comes home and she's like, so I ran into this problem, and then she lists all the problems first, like of all the things that could have gone wrong and how she managed to navigate that system and succeed. So it's like, well, there it is. There's a great joy in solving a complex problem, very head-centered kind of experience. So there are some really tremendous high sides to all of these strategies, all of these patterns, but then there's also the low side. And so that's what I'm speaking of when I say, when did the pattern stop working? Is more of the protective kind of, the world is out to get me, or whatever is functioning underneath, the fear of rejection, that kind of thing. When did that stop working for each of you? And what are some things you have learned to do to begin to grow?
The self-deprecating humor and like jumping into everything, like being, it definitely works for being like likable or having more friends, and that's really nice. But it doesn't really help in work situations when you really want to advance and stuff, because if you put yourself down, other people are not going to like pull you up. Like they'll say like, oh no, you're good or whatever, but they're not going to, like make you a promotion. They're like, like, okay, you can advance to this position because you kind of, put yourself down all the time. So I found myself in a pattern where I used to get really bored and frustrated that I didn't get anywhere. And I was really frustrated that like people didn't see me or see my potential, but actually I was like holding myself back. And I got bored and I got frustrated and I quit my job and I'd start a new one and like, okay, in this one, I'll go for this. And so I do that for a bit. And then, I could just jump into challenges and stuff like that, but I'd still use those same defense mechanisms of the humor and kind of putting myself down and just being kind of funny and likable and like good at what I did, but not like pushing myself forward other than kind of jumping to a different job. What I've been working with is actually being honest with what I want and honest with my ambition and staying where I'm at and trying to get it from there. And that can be really scary because saying what I want and like being really honest with that, it means that I can fail. And that would be just my fault because I said I can do this. Maybe I can't. It's so much easier when someone else proposed like, okay, maybe you can do this. And I go, yeah, sure, I can try. But when I said, no, I want the chance to do this, that's really scary. So that's what I've been doing now, and it's working quite well. But it's still scary. Yeah.
Boy, you just gave a lot of sixes out there, and those who are in relationship with the sixes, fantastic advice around the job stuff. I've coached a few sixes around this very thing, where it's like not enough of the three inside them, right? So we talk about resource points. The six goes drawing up the three to say, hey, I matter. I'm going to advocate for myself. I'm going to help myself be seen, right? And putting yourself out there. So yeah, well done. That takes a lot because sixes don't want to put their, sixes are the ones that's like, the moment you put your head above everybody else, you're a target. Like, let's just kind of go along and let's just make sure we're all crossing the finish line together. Right. So,
Yeah.
My journey was not as purposeful as Rebecca's. There wasn't a time where I realized that my behavior was no longer serving me. It was more gradual, and it was both in the realm of work and socially. So work-wise, I work for myself. I'm a lawyer, and I had spent until a few years ago most of my career doubting myself, being afraid of the hard assignment, wanting the easy assignment that I know I can do. Somehow a few years ago, gradually, I realized I can do it, and I actually enjoy the harder assignments, the ones where I really have to problem solve, not where I know what I'm doing because I've done it 100 times. I actually now like the new experiences. I can't necessarily point to one thing that changed that, except I am married to an 8 who always said, what are you, an idiot? Of course you can do it. So, tough love is what 8s do. But basically he was my number one cheerleader. And then socially, Yeah, same thing. I just decided I don't care what other people think. I'm just going to be myself. And it's allowed me to talk to people I would have never talked to before, because I would have assumed they would reject me and not want me, and not want to socialize with little old me. And now I realize a lot of people actually are open to talking to me, like pretty much everybody. So all this fear of rejection, maybe it was for nothing. I wish I had discovered this sooner, but I don't know if it's just maturity or what, but just a few years ago, I would say since the pandemic, something's happened, something's shifted, and I'm really grateful for it.
Wonderful.
I think I would say it's interesting. I don't think I lack for moving and shaking. I think I tend to throw a wrench in things quite often. I think this is the counterphobia thing. So I think for me, what I realized is in all the preparation and endless worrying and just prepping for bad things, that crowds out a lot of other experiences and textures of life. It crowds out some of the more, soft and poignant and tender things. And it can really feel especially when I'm stressed, the world is a claustrophobic place, and it's not abundant and it's not expansive. And I don't really enjoy things. I was the kind of student where if I got a good grade in an assignment, I would feel more stressed out because I'd oh, I have to keep this up. I have to keep doing well, So good things were bad things were bad things. Everything just kind of fed into, the feeling of sort of not having enough. And I think also with the relationships piece, I think always feeling primed at to be at the edge of a rupture or a betrayal, really puts a strain on relationships. And I'm shadow boxing with the worst versions of other people and not really, not really giving them the credit they deserve. I have a friend who's a 6 and it's kind of annoying. You're wow, you're always testing me. Do I ever save up a bank of trust or, are you just an Etch-a-Sketch and you just erase away all the good things? So anyway, all that I think is what I've been working on. And I think just realizing that what I've done a lot is create this really rigid external shell. And that's been the way to stay safe. But that shell is not, it's not letting other things through, It's really just a sterile exterior. And so I think I'm working on patience, being okay with things, almost realizing that if I let myself, let's let the scary thing in, what happens, am I still, can I rise to that occasion? Do I have enough internal resources, and making the inside feel safe and not necessarily creating the big outside safeness. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, this question feels so complex, maybe the most complex one for me to answer, because it feels like it's come in stages of having, first of all, as a 6, I think I've tried a lot of different methods, or there's a lot of different patterns for me of building safety. And so each one sort of has had a sort of falling apart awareness. I need to do something different, so to speak. And I think it started for me in going to college and getting out of the environment I was in and having new people, new space, and to kind of create something for myself that felt safer. And safety is dependent on the people you're with and their capacity to really engage with you and care for you. And so that was a piece of it, realizing oh, there are safer people I can be around. This is what relationships can look like. Was a big piece for me of realizing oh, I don't trust people, but I really want connection. I need to put myself out there more. And then in sort of challenging myself, building more safety and more connection with people. And a big piece of it for me was also a way of creating safety was to just do everything, to get straight A's, to have a lot of jobs, to be working constantly. And I burnt out pretty quickly. And I realized okay, that's not going to work for me. I need to find some balance, and I need to find more of what I actually need and then create that in my life, which means that I have to self-activate. And part of me hates that because, again, it's this opportunity for rejection. And a big piece for me has been working with that, learning to separate the rejection from my identity. Letting myself feel the pain of rejection because it's painful to be rejected, but to not take that on as oh, I'm not worth loving, or I'm not worth, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think that took a lot for me to get there, a lot of relationships falling apart and painful experiences, but that's a big piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you named something really important, the separation from the feeling, the emotion of rejection, the sense of aloneness, the sense of being abandoned in your fear from everything else that you interpret that to be. And I think that that's growth when we can do that. When we can start to separate out, like, yeah, as a 6, I will always have a certain measure of vigilance, a certain measure of concern and fear and whatever else we might name it, that existential feeling internally. And yet, what do I do with it? How do I think about that? And, what stories do I develop from that? And being able to separate those two out so you can go, oh, that's the story I'm telling myself. But is that really what's happening here? And then taking that risk, because there's only so much you can do in the thought realm. And then you have to just say, okay, I'm going to put myself out there and see what happens, and take, small dosages of that, and, get your system used to it. And then you keep building on that. And as you do that, then, like you said, Julie, over the course of time, all of a sudden you find yourself saying, wow, look at this. I can do this. I couldn't do that before. So I want to thank each of you so much for opening up your heart, opening up your mind to us. So thank you so very much to each of you.
Thank you so much for listening and learning with us in this ongoing evolution where we learn from each other. You can follow us on Instagram at Art of Growth, and make sure you're subscribed to this podcast so you don't miss any of the good stuff coming up. Feel free to email us and we will try and get back to you in a timely manner. But for now, my friends, may you lean into yourself and those around you as a source of safety, security, and support, as a source of faith, meaning moving forward even when you do not know the outcome for sure, and use your gift to see multiple outcomes, to anticipate and strategize, but then move forward with what your heart and your body knows is the right next step, even if you do not know the ultimate result. All right, my friends, thank you again. Grace and growth.